Welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to be using Nature Set number 21 here on a piece of dark blue Stardream Lapis Lazuli. If you're following along with me, you can stamp it on any type of dark blue paper. Your media combination might be a little bit different. This Lapis Lazuli and this iridescent style of metallic paper, it doesn't allow certain types of inks to dry very well on it or to transfer to it. So give a little test to things like your dye-based black or your pigment ink black if you don't have something like a fast-drying Brilliance pigment ink, okay? And just see how it dries. Try heat setting, whatever. See how it works out, and just use the appropriate ink for your surface. Okay, so this is a dark blue paper, so I foresee this being a nighttime type of scene. And I'm not going to go into too much lighter shade, lighter value impressions in the background like I did on my previous video when I'm stamping on a photograph of clouds, called photo stamping if you haven't seen that. Because this is just such a dark paper to begin with. So really faint impressions, would be kind of pointless on here. So let's just go for just straight impressions. That makes it real easy, right? Okay, so if this is the first video you've seen, you might be familiar with certain types of stamping where you have to stamp something out, and if you have something behind it or whatnot, you might have to do some masking, but in this form of stamping here with Stampscapes imagery, I've removed a lot of the necessity for certain types of processes like careful masking, cutting out masks, liquid mask, whatever that people use. And you just want to do some overlapping. Okay, so I have, this is my main image. Now I'm doing my filler stamps. I'm making some foreground and some background. So we'll go with this larger cypress right here. I do have a larger cypress, but not in this set. Okay, so we're just stamping this out. This will act as kind of like, almost like two pillars on each side of my house. Okay, go like that. It's kind of represents something in the foreground, okay? I'll go for another impression. Make sure you re-ink your image. And we'll go over here. I always have the top of the tree going off the top of the paper, okay? All right, so we have that. See how it's kind of flanking our scene like that? It kind of creates a little bit of a visual lead-in. This is so dark. Sorry, I need to hold this up a little bit more so you can see it. I'll try to zoom in and try to remember to not work off screen, which is a problem with me. I get so into my scenes, I just kind of forget I'm working down here or something like that. Okay, I'm just doing some little wiping off like that. Temporary cleaning like so. All right, let's get a little bit of background in here. Let's go for this kind of smaller cypress cluster. That small grouping of trees, and we can go for some imagery back in that area. Okay, now what I said about you not needing to mask anything, sometimes I do partial impressions, okay? So what I'm going to do is, this is all black, and I'm going to add it right down in that area there, but I don't want it so harsh black like right in here because it might obscure the nice silhouette of these trees by having something so dark behind it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition this stamp right here. It's very easy to do. You just kind of wipe off this ink right down here. Now when I do this, I'm not wiping off all the ink, okay? I'm just transitioning it from wet ink to dry down here, okay? So I still have some ink down here, but see this? I've removed some of it right here, okay? And this is a pretty thick ink, so you gotta, remove a decent amount. So it's going from wet, medium, dry, driest down here, okay? Transition in it, so it should stamp from dark to light because you have more ink up there, okay? Okay, so that's what I'll do a few times here. And I'm just overlapping some of my trees. It's not going to look like it's in, you know, it's in front of this one, okay, because it's lighter, okay? So it looks something like that, or it looks like that. See that lighter bit back there? So see, I have this, but I do get that impression back there, but it's a lot more faint, okay? All right, let's do the same thing. I just re-inked this. I'll blot it off like so. Maybe I'll kind of blot it off a decent amount up top there. Maybe going for an impression that looks like trees that look like they're even farther back in the distance, okay? Okay, so we'll take this, and I'm going to aim it right in here. Okay, see that kind of depth that we're building right there? I said I wasn't going to do it too light because this is so dark to begin with, but that doesn't look too bad. It does stand out on this paper. When you go like this, it's a little bit harder to see, but you know, if you look up closer like that. Okay, let's go for that same type of thing. How about in these two areas right here? I'll just make this really fast, okay? Watch my process right here. I'll ink up like so. I'll blot it off once, and I'll take some ink off like that. I could have done that, you know, with those other impressions too, but didn't bother. Okay, so remember, this is a lighter impression, so I can just stamp it right over my cypress tree right here. It's not as if that tree looks like it's in front of this one because this one's darker than that one back there, okay? You have to kind of get a feel for it. If your black pad is very dry, then don't stamp so much ink off, okay? My pad right here it's pretty wet, so I had to give it a pretty good, you know, stamping. Okay, so here, okay, now this one right here, I'm going to be stamping over the top of my cabin in this little area right here. So I've wiped off a pretty good amount of that, so when I stamp like that, it doesn't show up in the roof of my cabin, okay? So you get that right there, and you have, you know, some decent depth within this composition right here. All right. Let's take some of these cypress knees here. All right. Like that. Now, foreground imagery, I go for a full impression of it with my ink, okay? I want it nice and dark. Things in the foreground are usually darker than things in the background because you don't have light reflecting off something so distant and kind of breaking up in the, you know, the air, the molecules, and, you know, water molecules and everything between that distant object and your eye. That's why things in the distance, you know, are usually lighter than things, you know, right next to you. If you're looking at trees, you know, that are 2 miles away, they're usually, you know, they look much lighter than that same type of tree right next to you if you're out in kind of a forested area. Okay, so these are some cypress knees down at the base here, and it gives it some good depth in the piece, okay? All right, now, this Brilliance ink, it's designed to dry on less than very porous papers like, you know, like cardstock or something of that sort. But that being said, when you're stamping it on to papers like this, iridescents, metallics, or whatnot, what you might want to do, if you have it, is heat set this. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a hairdryer. Or you can just let this set for a little bit and dry. But pigment inks are pretty thick if you've used that. You can use a StazOn or something like that too, and that dries instantly, okay? Okay, now, pigment ink, when it dries flat, okay? It's not dark and shiny anymore like it was. But that's just the way it goes with this type of ink. Okay, now that we have this, let's add in some additional tones. We have all of our composition kind of established here, or it is established, not kind of. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in both shadows and light in this piece. I'm trying to decide on which one I should start with. You know, you can go either way in terms of your process. Let's see. All right, where did my Brilliance White? Okay. These are my tools here. Just a cheap bag of cotton balls. Go for your 100% cotton, okay? It just works so much better. This is a very cheap bag too. You can see my cotton balls are, you know, some of them are kind of fraying like that in package, but that doesn't seem to affect anything negatively. Okay, so I'm going to add some little bit of clouds up top here, I think. I might actually add like a little moon too, like a full moon up here. But here's your very high-tech cloud template. Okay, I'm joking. And I'm just going to add that down. Okay, see these billows are going upward like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cotton ball and I'm just going to taper this, okay? I want to kind of create a little bit of a top portion of the cloud, like so. Be careful if your white pad is super juicy. Mine is not. So I can just kind of go right from pad to paper, okay? You don't want to get big blobs, in other words, okay? See, mine is kind of dry. See that I'm getting a little bit of a cloudy type of look to that. My white pad is really, really dry right now, it looks like. Okay. You don't need to worry about... See, my paper is kind of moving as I do this, too. But that's fine. You can make your cloud look even more kind of airy and billowy if you're kind of moving this as you do it, you know. It's not giving you that kind of harsh edge. Oops, I got some ink in my finger right there. So that, it's kind of that haze up top there, like so. And then you can freehand it too. You can come into it like so. Oops. See, now that's way too much over here. Just take your cotton ball and just... It doesn't give you a super long time to remove that, but you can remove it like that and just kind of spread it around. Okay. And we'll just take it in like so. Now that kind of haze like that, I also like it down here as kind of fog within the piece. So I'll use some of it like that too. Okay, now let me see. I'm looking for a small, my small hole punch. Let me go and try to find that. I think this will be good to have a little bit of a, kind of a sky focal point in the form of like a full moon up here. Nothing huge, but just something up here to complement what I have down here. Okay, let me go look for my little hole punch. Alright, found it. It was right in front of me in my little tool cup. I'm just going to take like that, and that's going to be my... I can get a clean little punch there. Alright, that's going to be my full moon. And let's just put it right... Where should we put it? Let's put it right over on this side. Something like this, okay? And you'll just use your cotton ball. Get something like that. Now that looks really harsh like that, just as is. So what I like to do is I like to bring in some additional kind of glow and texture around it. So what I'll do is I'll kind of get some, try to make this kind of a little bit smaller, like this, okay? And then you'll just take that and tap right over that moon. See, it's kind of giving it that overall haze around it. It softens up that harsh, stamping of it too. And then what we can do is we can add in some additional clouds around there, okay? Kind of get used to using kind of dry incarnations of your media so that you get a more varied, kind of a wider range of applications of your media, meaning dye-based inks, pigment inks, everything. We're mostly used to using things in their fuller incarnations like pens or something like that. I mean, people blend with the pens, and make something, they make a mark and they kind of blend it out, and it makes it lighter. But I think most people are kind of, when they stamp something with white, they expect real white. They don't think about it in terms of, kind of like a dusting of it. Think about it like more in terms of like you're using a little bit of pastel and building it up. Yeah, think about your wet media that way too, and you'll get kind of a much wider kind of application and result from it. And I don't know, you just get more out of more money's worth from that, doing things like that. Use it in its full incarnation too, but really use it in its kind of lighter incarnations. Okay, so we have our moon up there, and this whole scene is very dark, right? But let's bring some of that moonlight down into this water down here now too, okay? And if you go over the front of some of your objects too, that's fine. That'll just look like fog, maybe. Or hopefully it does, okay? See that down there? And I'm just kind of spreading that around. I'm not re-inking. I'm just kind of really spreading it out like that. Look at that. Isn't it suddenly bringing that area to life, having that light in there? Now, I've created shadows in my designs, right? Like that. So when I'm bringing the light in between, like something like this, I won't go into the shadow area too much, okay? So see right here, I'll kind of work around that shadow a little bit because the tree is still casting that shadow. So see, it doesn't have to be too much of a mystery about where you place your lighting. You just don't, illuminate too much of the shadow area, unless it represents fog, kind of going in the front of it, okay? Which I am doing a little bit, but will retain a lot of the shadow, though. But the thing is, I'm building this up really slowly, so it's not like I'm going to go like this. And oh my god, I added too much, because you're never using it that way. You're just kind of using a really dry incarnation of something, which makes the application of it. You remove the kind of the precarious element of it by just adding very little at a time. See, like down here, I'm just kind of illuminating this area ever so slowly. That was a little bit of a blob there, but just spread it out, okay? Now we'll still bring in some black into this, so if it doesn't apply kind of perfectly with your white, which mine never does either, I just kind of blend it out with my black. I have that blotch down here with my white, but I just know that I'll just come in there with some black and that'll take care of that. Okay. This is where it's really coming together, isn't it? Kind of adding this white. It's kind of bringing the scene to life and kind of giving it, that kind of atmosphere that I want. It's one of the fun things about working on dark paper like this. It's getting these types of effects. See up here in the sky, you can just kind of freehand it too. I don't want to get rid of my kind of cloud line, but I can kind of soften it a little bit and make it look a little bit more kind of airy and mystical like that. See that? I just kind of freehanded that in there. It's kind of like illuminating some of the clouds that are closer to the moon. Cotton balls work, I don't know, I find they work really great for this type of touch here. If you're going for a very soft application, I can't think of an applicator that's really softer than a piece of cotton ball, and you can really manipulate it and change the shape of it for the purpose in which you're applying it. Okay, so in this case it represents vapor and mist, in the form of clouds and moisture in the air. What better than something that's like super soft to apply it with? And let's face it, these things are really cheap. I bought this one bag of it, and I'm using it quite a bit. I'll usually use the same cotton ball for, I don't know, more than one scene at least, 2 or 3 sometime. As long as I don't let this sit out, for like a week or something like that, it's pretty much, I'm able to use it again, a few times. Eventually it starts getting really hard on here, and I can't get like a really soft application of it, so I'll switch it out. Kind of really illuminating that area down here. Okay, let's bring some of this kind of mist across here too, okay? This really gives it some good atmosphere. Okay, now here's one of the things too. When this dries, it will dry darker than what it looks like when it is applied. It becomes more translucent, kind of moving towards transparent. It's still translucent though because it's white, but black images dry lighter than what they look like when they were freshly applied. When you go in with white, it appears lighter than it will look like when it's dry, so kind of the opposite. Alright, so that is that. Let's go with some... I'm trying to think if I want to go with the black right now, because I'm going to illuminate those windows in there and the reflection down here. I'm trying to think if I want to do that now or later. Oh, I tell you what, while we're working with the white, let's go ahead and do that now. So, I have my white paint pen. It's an acrylic, it's a 0.7 millimeter white acrylic paint pen. You really have to shake these up. I just used this yesterday, but the paint is opaque enough, using it. But you do want to shake it up every time you use it. And that way you'll get a nice opaque, reasonably opaque application of this media. And it is like acrylic paint. So, all right, now what am I going to do on here? I'm going to bring out those. I'm going to do some interior illumination. I would imagine using like a yellow in there would be interesting too. I'm just going to use the white. I think it would relate to the moonlight somewhat, being in that white. I guess you could have done the moon in yellow too. That'd be cool. But I want to kind of create a little bit of a relationship between, the two kind of focal points in the scene, which is this cabin and the moon, right? Okay, so you have that right there, but then you have these reflections. I've rendered those, that reflection of the cabin windows in the water down here. See them right in here? those are the illuminated windows down here, so I'm doing that and that. Alright, so that's a little bit harsh down here, but don't worry about that. We're going to remedy that. Okay, this dries really fast too, so you don't really need to heat set it. Okay, so I'm going to give those windows a little bit of a glow. So this, cotton ball would be a little bit too wide for that. So I'm just taking a Q-tip like this, blot it off a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of create a little bit of glow around those windows like that. I won't go too harsh, but it's kind of creating a little bit of a kind of a relationship again. I keep saying that word, but there's that kind of illumination happening with the moon, and you can have that same kind of soft, glowing light in this area right here. Okay. Now you notice that my moon is starting to get a little bit or a lot darker, I think. Well, especially in relation to those. So you can just hit it with a little bit more white ink like this. Go right over the top of it. Like so. See that? Isn't that kind of a nice relationship between those two? It kind of creates a visual dialogue, as we say, between those two focal points. See this, putting this little over that, those windows there, kind of creates that little glow. And it softens it, like that. Looks like a pretty good interior illumination. I guess we could have drawn that little moon up there too with a paint pen or something like that. Okay, so that looks pretty decent for my white. I might add a little bit more, but let's get on with some shadows here. Okay, now our shadows are already established in the designs right down here. You have some shadows down here, and that's stamped out black, the base of the trees here. But I'd like to reiterate that with some additional inks, and I think that this will kind of frame things off really nicely too. So I'm just going in with my black ink pad like this, okay? And what we'll do is we'll get a little amount like this. Here's the thing too about when you're doing this right here. See, that's a pretty juicy pad, but it applies like that. You can see right here, those two areas are probably where my finger is. Okay, so it's tapping down a little bit harder. But see, what I'm going for is just kind of a light application of it. I'm not going for just straight, thick black. I'm going for that right there, okay? Well, maybe that's a little bit too light now, but so I'll dab in here again, but kind of you just go for this, kind of light application at first. You can kind of go like this too. See, I'm kind of moving my finger like this, not just dabbing straight up and down. You can do both techniques, okay? So I'm going like this. See that how it kind of darkened in that corner right there? Let's do the same thing over here. This creates a vignette. It kind of frames the scene off and contains things. Okay. It's not super visible at first. Well, this pad's pretty juicy, so I do see it pretty good. But, when you're just applying, kind of a light shade like that, you just kind of keep building it up and it gets darker. Okay. But this framing device here, it contains the composition more. And when you make an area of your piece darker, in this case, the entire well, I don't know about the entire perimeter. Definitely four corners, though. It makes the lighter things within here seem that much lighter. Okay, so you take things one step darker somewhere, and the lighter things seem, by contrast, one step lighter. We're not working with light in this scene. It's not physical light like you have a little light bulb in the back here and some kind of LED or something like that. So we're just working with contrasts. This is all reflected light. My light is hitting this and kind of bouncing back up at my eye. So in order to represent light, you use contrast or darkness. Okay, so this is, let's see, allow a little bit of shadow at the base of this tree, maybe, and you can add it into the tree if you want to, too. And just kind of adding a little bit more shadow at the base of the trees kind of anchors them into the scene a little bit more, kind of makes them a little bit more kind of substantial, and it gives them visual weight, like this. You can use your Q-tip for, you know, smaller areas if you want to. You can blend in some of your clouds up here if you want to, too. You can use, you know, both black and that white, like that, okay. You can add some little streaks in your water if you want, like this, and go into that white there, just so it's not so, you know, I don't know, kind of uniform maybe. So I'm just kind of putting in a streak like that into my water down here, so it's kind of breaking up that, you know, just straight application of white in here. So it kind of gives it a little bit more atmosphere. You can see this is all light up here. You can kind of come into it like this and just kind of break that up, and adding a little bit of a horizon in the background. Let's darken up right over here, just a touch. It's kind of getting that feel, right? You know, when you start doing little things like this, you just kind of add a little bit at a time. One of the things that the biggest thing as far as kind of developing things, what I always, maybe I don't always mention it, but what you want to do is when we get to working into small areas like this, okay, it's easy to focus in on like a tiny area, but remember to hold the scene back kind of at arm's distance to get kind of a clear view of kind of the overall piece. Okay, now I'm looking at these reflections down here. I think it's a little bit too light. Maybe I want to darken my reflections a little bit and kind of bring more focus to up there. So I'm just going to put a little bit of dab of some black over the top of it. I don't want to darken them out or something like that where you can't see them, but I just want to mute them a touch. So something like that. You know, they're just a little bit less pronounced in that, you know, murky water down there. See that? And that's about right. Come here. All right, let's go back to white now. Okay, I think that's about good with the black. And you can do a little bit of refinements. There's a little bit more white, and plus, you know, this is, you know, the white is kind of drying and it's looking darker, so I can kind of make adjustments accordingly if I want to add a little bit more, you know, white glow in certain areas. You can do that. Put a little bit more around the clouds, kind of close to the moon, how they're really reflecting a lot of that light. Something like that. When you add a little bit more kind of lighting around your light source like that, reflected light, it just kind of reiterates that kind of light direction. See this right over here? I'll put a little bit on that side of the cloud facing the moon, so it just kind of reiterates it. There's this little billows like this, and on the left side of the billow, you can kind of place some pigment ink like that. It's subtle, but can you see on that slope like that, where I've illuminated that side right here, here, and here, it reiterates the light that's coming from here. Notice that little one right there. It's kind of pointing that way. On that side of the cloud, you know, if you want to make it a little bit lighter, just go like that. this cloud right here that's above the moon, you can kind of bottom light like that. All right, so my area right in here is dry and kind of dark, so I can hit this a little bit more to get that glow coming out like that. All right, now here's some of the things. Sometimes that white can really stand out like that, so I'm going to add some of this lighting on my porch right here. I don't want to add too much. So adding that like that. It should probably be a lot more, but it's just some of that lighting on the porch. It's a little bit too much, though, but we'll just go with that for right now. So I'll kind of add it like that, but then if it's too pronounced, again, just come in here with some black. Okay, I don't want that black. I want that real light application of it, and we'll kind of take some of that out of it like that, so it's a little bit less pronounced. Okay, now here's something that's really fun. It just occurred to me when I was doing those little dots down there. Let's add some kind of real atmosphere into here and depth. Okay, I'm going with these little dots like this. Yeah, these could be, you can do green or something like that. In here, I'm just going to stick with the white, but how about some fireflies, huh? Something like that. All right, but let's take our Q-tip and go with some white ink. Blot it off a few times and go right over your dots. Just build it up nice and slowly, okay? Very light touch at first. You can get a feel for how much ink is on your tip there. And just lightly dab in. And we can kind of create that little glow from the flies. Or the lightning bugs. You don't have to do it over every single one, but little lights in there. It's not kind of a fun little light show. And I think I want to do some little kind of ripples in the water like this. All this specular light. Just kind of going along with the some of the ripples that are in the design like that. You can see where I've drawn them in, right in here. So I'm just going to in here and I'm just kind of putting a few dots along those areas. And then right back in here. Kind of keeping them horizontal. Kind of in the spirit of the little striations of the water. You can put some on the sides of the tree facing the light too. I wouldn't do too much because it's a fairly dark scene, but on the side of the some objects kind of facing the light, it actually looks pretty good. You can just add it as much as you want accordingly. Kind of brings the piece to life. A few up in here on the clouds, facing the moon. I'm gonna do the moon in that. With the pen, I think I want a sharper pen, sharper moon with the pen. Let's go like this. Okay. It's a little bit too harsh right now, but we'll just hit it with the cotton ball and pigment ink. See, on the areas that are just kind of facing the moon, I could put it on this side of the tree. Okay, and if it ever kind of gets a little bit too crazy, with too much bright illumination, then just hit it with some black ink. So it's kind of an oscillation. You're just kind of going back and forth and adjusting and reapplying or building, really, your tones up in here. Yeah, it got a little crazy down here, so I'll just kind of mute some of those reflections, to where they're a little bit more subtle. They're subtle, but they're still there. All right, let's see. I want to darken in some of this area over here a little bit more. I think that looks pretty good. All right. Moonlight on the bayou. Where's my white? Oh, final adjustments. Oops, way too much right there, huh? All right, I think that will do. It's always fun adding those little types of touches like that in there. Okay, let's take a look at this and see, okay, what we have. All right. Dark piece, let me adjust my, well, I was going to say let me adjust my exposure, but that's about right. Okay, so this looks a lot different with a lot of reflected light. That's the Lapis Lazuli, right? A reflective type of surface like that. Depending on how much light you have on here, it'll reflect that much more. You see some of the blues and some different areas like that. So metallics, one of the fun things about them is that they have different personalities depending on kind of how much light you have reflecting off of them, because they do reflect light very well. This one's a dark blue, but it still has that iridescence to it. But look at that kind of iridescence kind of happening down here in the water. Look how I really like this area down here in terms of that lighting on there. It's that dialogue between kind of light source. There's three light. Well, I guess there's three light sources in here. But it kind of creates that doing the same types of applications and techniques on both sources like this, white paint pen in here, and then white pigment ink around those two. It creates that continuity between them and visual dialogue. And then you also have it in some of the smallest of little elements down here. They're very visible because this is a dark paper and this is a dark scene, but these little fireflies are also the white paint pen and the white pigment ink applied on top of it. So you have all those little types of elements throughout the piece, even in the smallest of little touches like that. And that's what brings this whole piece together. There's little types of little sparkles down here, and then you have that kind of glowing light down here. So when you do those different types of things, it can be anything. This happens to be kind of a value in terms of light and texture, in terms of the softness of it. That's what's kind of the needle and thread running through this entire piece right here. And it's just one of those things you can do. You can do all kinds of things. You can do pieces where you have similar colors and intensities and whatnot. Shapes, certainly. But I don't know, that's one of those things that I'm always trying to do. I'm always trying to create visual continuity throughout my pieces with similar types of touches and whatnot, application methods or media. All right, but again, look at that. This is what's really fun about it. You know, really dark and very different looking. You almost can't even see any blue, and then you add it like this, and you get that blue tinge in there. So when someone receives something like this from you too, if you're giving away cards and whatnot, it really creates that kind of interactive type of experience for them to look at it in different ways and at different angles and to see something different on there. And it's really fun. And then when you do things like these small little details throughout, it kind of promotes further, closer investigation, and it rewards the viewer for taking a closer look and really, you know, going through it like that. You've given them something to look at. So, like on these trees right here, I have those little highlights on the side of the tree facing the moon. See on this one, it's on the other side of the tree. And whatnot. Okay, so anyways, blabbing on here. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like these videos, please click the thumbs up. And if you feel so inclined, to subscribe to the channel. Thanks as always for watching.